Okay. Hello everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. There will be some updates which I will share in the middle of the episode. But I'll dive into it. I wanted to speak about forgiveness. And how we need to forgive the self that did not know better. For really all of life is the continuity of attention. You know, we can say that we are people, we are objects that have become subjects, and the subject can dream, can in some sense expand the horizon of the object. You know, guys, maybe I need to share the announcement actually first. The announcement is that these talks are having a toll on me, on my voice, so I will be taking like 2 weeks off to work on the Mr.Within's library. I may attempt talks here and there, but the aim is to rest and have my voice return. But anyways, so you see, every communication, anytime a human being communicates, sorry guys, changing the song, okay? So every time a human being communicates, behind our eyes there's a world. That means the purpose of communication is to share what is behind our eyes, in front of our eyes. If we were a telepathic society, so when someone comes to speak about forgiveness, I would say that where I'm beginning from is first the concept of why forgiveness is necessary. And let me say what forgiveness is. Maybe this is a better starting point. You know, some people may not know what forgiveness is, and Saint Dictionary will forgive them. And so forgiveness is a noun. It means the action or process of forgiving or being forgiven. That's incredible. Ready and willing to forgive, or in some sense, forgive is a verb. Obviously, forgive is a verb, but it says here to stop feeling angry or resentful towards someone for an offense, flaw, or mistake. To no longer feel angry about or wish to punish. To cancel a debt. And used in polite expressions as a request to excuse one's foibles, ignorance, or impoliteness. And so, guys, you know, I remember in my youth, a teacher of mine had said this sentence, to forgive and forget. You know, an important ethical point in life, I would say. But so the concept of forgiveness is moving past something and pretty much letting go an event. I started off at the beginning by talking about how the human being is a creature that communicates. In its communication, it shares its inner realms. If we were to think of forgiveness in the context of a communicating creature that is kind of divided between worlds, it's kind of oscillating between inner, outer, inner, outer, inner, outer. Guys, I hope I can forgive myself for this episode if I stall. you know. Pretty much, I mean, religion, the concept of forgiveness, you can say, it's popularized in religion. But if you take a humanistic dimension, it's as if any time a creature moves past something, they have forgiven it. You know, there's a sort of similarity between forgetting and forgiving. You know, that means as if they're both the ends of a chapter in life, you know. A human being opens its eyes in the world. It makes decisions. These decisions have a weight. They have a weight in the sense of what kind of memory is left behind for the person. That means it has a sort of pressure for the mind. And the decision that the human being makes, it has a pressure for others. Now, for forgiveness, you can say a human being goes through incidents in life, and if it wants to have an inner realm that the attention is not preoccupied by unnecessary thoughts, the person forgives a lot of things. You know, we have this view that you know, I mean, not everybody, but like some schools of thought believe that the brain is like an advanced recording device, and so the brain records various images from the beginning of our life to the end. In the sense that it's like that means kind of like the child is born, the newborn child. The child doesn't have a psychology, it doesn't have an individuality, it doesn't have a personality yet. The child is just some biological phenomena. The brain starts recording and remembering things. Now, once we personalize, they say like by the age of 14 the child individualizes, but even before, earlier than that, by the age of 14 the child accepts an identity, but earlier than that, when the child notices that the moment the child can see itself in the mirror and notice that its reflection is itself, that's kind of like when individual consciousness begins. And so once there's individual consciousness, it's as if everything the brain was doing from the beginning of our birth to the point of our conscious personality, it's as if it's recorded. You know, like in some sense the brain is storing everything. That means technically, theoretically, if the brain is recording everything like a camera from the beginning of our life, we all, how would I say it? We all are like master level painters and communicators. We don't realize it. You know, it's as if, imagine you wanted to draw something and the person's like, I don't know what to draw, but imagine how much, not imagine, just try to consider how many different lines you have seen. Right now I'm in my on my balcony and I'm looking outside and I'm seeing the buildings in the distance, you know, and everything has lines. That means the moment we open our eyes, there is it's like we see color, we see lines, and we see space, like depth, you know. And you know what's fascinating? Color and geometry are two-dimensional, but space is what makes the moment three-dimensional. Without space, it would be a picture life, you know, but because there's space, in some sense, we can move around in the picture. It becomes a film. So, as individuals, all the lines that the mind has seen, it can access. Okay. And honestly, what is knowledge? Knowledge is pretty much like a part of the earth separating itself from the earth and then trying to figure out the whole thing again. So it's as if unconsciously the brain is receiving all this information in life. Consciously, we create a story, we recycle all our sensory perception, and we turn it into a character in a story that is making decisions. Now, this character in the story, if it wants to, how can I tell you, anytime we move beyond the story context, reality goes beyond humanization, guys. That means seldom is this said, but to be a human being means to be a human character, you know, in a world where the human being can continue. So my point is that this creature that we are was in some sense just an unconscious world moving. Our consciousness separated us from this unconscious world. This conscious separation allowed us to establish relationships with reality. And it's codependent, by the way. What that means is the concept of a self and a concept of the world are simultaneous. If there is no world, there is no self. If there is no self, there is no world. If a person is not individual, they cannot actually engage any verb. You know, verbs originate through an individual's movement. And so it's as if the world was a noun, and then it became a verb when we became conscious of the noun. So this character in the story, pretty much we're like this energetic intelligence in the moment. As we make a decision, we create a certain kind of memory for ourselves, and forgiveness is all about what kind of memory you want your future self to have. There's this quote from Louis B. Smedes. He says, "To forgive is to set a prisoner free and discover that the prisoner was you." So you see, that means even if we don't have the concept of forgiveness, the attention of the human being is on a certain reality, and it can move from that reality. That means, imagine somebody is hurt or insulted. Imagine we have person A and person B. And there is a line of communication between person A and person B. We can call that line AB or BA. Now, let's say the situation is a BA in the sense that person B has insulted person A. Now, person A can stay with person B and forgive person B and have a new start to the moment. That means person A is still with person B, but the consciousness has let go of an event. The attention has moved on from how the past had shaped it. And we can say, if a person A and person B, if person B insults person A and person A leaves the room, it is equivalent. That means, imagine you are somewhere and somebody wrongs you, and then you completely go to a different country, you know, or you go completely to a different place. It's as if over time the human experience is filled up by its direct experience, most immediate items of choice or realms of choice. So attention over time changes a person's character. That means the concept of forgiveness makes a lot of sense, really, in the sense that we are not just one person, we are a changing person. If we can't forgive people, we will never see new dimensions to them, you know. And believe it or not, usually family members, when they fight, they forgive each other the next day. Pretty much everybody wakes up as if nothing happened. You know, if you really care for the space and for the evolution of the moment. Think of like a parent and the child, I don't know, let's say that the young child pushes a TV and the parent's watching TV, like an important sports game. The child pushes the TV falls down and breaks, right? Now, what does the parent do? The parent doesn't go fighting a little kid. The parent instantaneously forgives. Why? Because in some sense, the child doesn't know better. And if we were to think about 8 billion human beings, in some sense interacting with each other, each having their own inner realm, each wanting to be expressed freely in their world, in the world that they see. So eventually our freedoms will impinge on one another, and there will be collisions on what the moment means, you know. These collisions can be bypassed as easily as the tolerance to let the moment go forth and new possibilities to happen. You know what it is? It's like time is a treadmill, and you know, it's as if like we're on the treadmill. When we can't forgive, the treadmill is pulling us. You know, the events that bother us are defining us. But the moment we step off the treadmill, okay, imagine you suddenly spill water on a treadmill as you're running, so you suddenly jump to the sides of the treadmill. You know, so it would be equivalent. You know, I can't believe I'm using a treadmill to explain human psychology, but like the way it seems like human psychology is running is that it's at where attention goes, reality stays there, right? That means imagine you're a young kid and you fought with someone when you were young. For example, me personally, you know, I've lived in Canada and Iran. Mainly in Canada, but some years during my teenage years I've been in Iran. And when I was the school that I attended to, you know, Tehran International School, represent, you know, you know, it was an IB based Swiss school, Swiss based school. But anyways, in this school, pretty much it was literally Fight Club, you know. And something people don't know, in theocratical societies, the schools are not, what do you call it, they're not what's the term, for example, there's a school just for the guys and there's a school just for the girls, you know. In regardless of whatever you can say year, you know, it's only in college when it becomes but so anyways, I was this school that I was in, it was literally, it was just accepted, you know. It was pretty much, fighting was accepted. And I remember there was a lot of fights that happened, you know. Some of them I was involved in, some of them I wasn't. I'm proud to say I didn't start any fights, but I did you know, back up friends in fights, you know. But my point is that there was a lot of incidents in that school where if I held on to, I would have a deformed character. That means sometimes forgiveness is necessary to allow you to update, not the other, you know. I mean, sure, there is situations where people also need forgiveness, you know. Like imagine that metaphor I used of the child pushing the TV and the parent forgiving the child, right? Imagine the child knows the wrong it has done, right? And the child starts crying and the parent's like, okay, I can't, you know. You know, the parent forgives the child, you know. But the idea is that if we can't forgive ourselves and if we can't forgive others, we get stuck to certain contexts of reality. right? And to me, because life is a verb, it's not a noun, there is no one self. That means if a person does something wrong, literally tomorrow they're literally, they wake up as a sort of completely different being in the space-time continuum. What I mean by this is not that like the idea of you is different, the idea of the person is the same. Like every day you wake up and you have the same name, but you don't have the same body. And we tend to say it's a new day, you know. So what that means is, regardless of our belief or disbelief, the self that is doing the believing and disbelieving is changing, or the self that is doing the good act or the bad act, you know, is changing, right? And that means because we change, if we are conscious, we have changed. It's as if you, let me tell you, time forgives everything. This is the nature of things. Just like how they say time heals everything. Imagine person A and person B are in a conflict. And for years, let's say for 10 years, person A and person B has been fighting, you know, every day to a point where they're like, yo, are we best friends, you know? but, but the idea is that if their attention goes away, if you can instantaneously forgive, you are a very advanced being. I'm telling you, you have a very advanced mind because you understand that the space of your attention can be used for other thought. You know, you know, a person may say in the type of society we find, the type of culture, humanity we find in civilization 1.0, this current civilization of ours, it is in some sense, to be someone who forgives all the time can also be seen as like that person is naive. There is a term in the Farsi language, something they say in Iran, and usually when people fight or there's an argument where the two people are rude, there's a saying they say. It's pretty much, it translates into English as if like sit down, you know. You know, as if like somebody, you know. It's like you get into a fight with someone, and you know, if they're a small fry, you say sit down, you know? So I would say one can sometimes in certain moments in life engage reality. Like I say this usually, I say there's an inner realm and outer realm. In front of your eyes, that's the outer realms. Behind your eyes, there's an inner realm. If there is any sort of problem, the person has to wonder about where the problem is, and a sort of percentage way, you know, as if is the problem from the outer realms more, or is the problem from the inner realms. People who are emotionally suffering, their problems are from the inner realms. Those people who are physically suffering, their problems are from the outer realms. In the type of world we have, because the universal declaration of, in the outer realms, because the universal declaration of human rights says that every human being is free to express their humanism, right? This means that in the outer realms, if somebody's liberty is being impinged upon, they have a right to defend their own liberty. It's as if, you know, so many people, you know, they defend their loved one, you know, but when it comes to themselves, some people don't defend themselves, you know. I'll give you an example. When I was younger, I have a twin brother, and I would always defend my twin brother, right? But there would be times where there would be conflict that would come to me, and I wouldn't be able to defend myself, you know. Sometimes my twin brother would help me, sometimes not, you know. And so what I'm saying is, it was as if like we may have an attitude cultivated through the view of another, but not from the view of ourself. You know, that means if you're someone who's forgiven everybody, but then you can't forgive yourself, you know, it's like there's a dysfunction. There's a dysfunction there. There's a story that I heard it from a Sufi context, you know. But I would tell you, the story evidently has religious significance. So in the 6th century, in the eastern part of the world, where the religion of Islam was taking place, just like we have stories of Christ, evidently there's a story about the Prophet Muhammad, who he is in some sense giving a sermon, giving this, I don't know, he's talking in this mosque, and this one person comes in the middle of his speech while he's talking to his followers, and for a moment, Prophet Muhammad stops speaking. It's as if for a moment he's just silent, as if, imagine somebody's giving a lecture and then somebody enters the room and for a moment there's a pause, you know, and then the Prophet continues to speak, as it is suggested. Now afterwards, people ask the Prophet, why did you pause when that person came in? And the Prophet looks at those people and says, this person that entered here, this person that came in the mosque, he is already in heaven, right? And so these followers are like, what? This person is heaven, we're all trying to go to heaven. And they go to that person and they ask him, you know, they go and ask him, and they say in some sense, how are you in heaven? Why was it the, you know, the Prophet who had a sort of divine archetype in that culture, why had the Prophet given such a high, significant attention to this person, you know? And so this guy goes to that guy who, when he entered in, the Prophet became paused, and he says, hey man, why did the Prophet say you're in heaven? What do you do? Like, how are you in heaven? You know? And the guy turns back, and this is something where I don't remember the ending of the story, guys, exactly, one part of it, but I remember pretty much a majority of the story. So what the guy says is that every day I go to sleep, I forgive. It's something in the sense like I forgive myself, I forgive others, I forgive the world, and I forgive myself. And the next day I wake up, it's as if I'm in a new world, you know? The guy gives that kind of an answer. The answer, I don't remember exactly this part of the story, but I remember that the guy's response is that he forgives. He pretty much forgives everything. You know, even if he makes a mistake himself, he forgives himself, you know. And believe it or not, I think it's one of the healthiest things to be able to laugh at a changing self. You know, sometimes in the middle of these talks, I remember my own childhood, and it makes me laugh, you know. Now, here's a very interesting concept, I will tell you, that we have, if I say forgive the self, let's say somebody says, hey man, you've forgiven others your whole life, forgive yourself for a change, you know? Now that person may be like, how do I forgive myself? You know, who is doing the forgiving of the self? That means we are ourself. How can we forgive ourselves? You know, this question can be asked. And I would say forgiving yourself means to accept yourself as a self. That means if you're a person in this world and you do something, and if you stay true to how you do it, it will show a result. That means whether people like it, whether people don't like it, if you implement something as an energetic expression here, it will have a consequence. And if you can accept how you set a moment into motion, or how you cause the moment, you will be able to accept the effect. So many people, they unconsciously cause their moment, and they're like, why is karma bothering me? Do you know? And that's really the challenge of attention, you know? That means it's as if we should ask, if we want our attention to continue, how do we want our attention to continue? You know? That means imagine like, you know, I've made mistakes in my life, of course. Everybody has. And if there's someone who hasn't made any mistakes in this life, you're not in this dimension. You're somewhere else, right? But if I don't forgive my own mistakes, I will never get to see the other dimensions to myself. It's as if even though I love people, even though I can't communicate to all types of people, but I love people. And I can tell you that you have to forgive the world, or you will never see it become better. We have to forgive our own, how we walked in the past. Like for example, I'm a smoker. It's having a toll on my voice and my, health, and when I think about it, I'm like, oh no, I gotta forgive myself and retaliate, Because it's in the inner realms, it's where your attention is, right? In the outer realms, like when an accident happens, let's say somebody does something accidentally and it hurts someone else, right? It's as if that person somehow gets away with instant forgiveness, though. It's as if when somebody doesn't know better, there is no self to judge, but when somebody knows better and they make a mistake, then forgiveness becomes complex, It's as if it's like a soccer player. Imagine scoring an own goal, right? Every person in the team are like, yo man, you scored the wrong goal. Imagine a defender in a football game who has ambitions of being a striker, and he gets the ball and it accidentally kicks it into his own goal. This has happened, by the way, guys. All the members will look at that individual, the coach would look at the individual, and they will forgive that person, but there will be a sort of sorrow, a sort of sadness and pity. It's like when we don't know how to do something and we do it, it's like this saying where this character in this anime show called Black Clover, he would say, in this Japanese show, the character said, being weak is nothing to be ashamed of. Staying weak is. Right? That means when you know you can be better, if you stay in an inferior position, it's as if, kind of Game of Thrones. Shame, shame, shame. And believe it or not, if human beings cannot forgive civilization, we will never see its greater dimensions. It's as if we don't feel we deserve to. There's something they discovered, not discovered, but there's something in human psychology where they were trying to figure out, in some sense, why do parents, for example, there's a lot of fathers that they leave their families and children, not just fathers, just pretty much human beings create a family, and then one member of the family leaves. And the member of the family leaves, and even when he comes to see the family, he doesn't feel comfortable and he still leaves, and they were trying to figure out what is the point of what's going on in the psychology of the human being. And they figured out that, let's say a parent who leaves the family, or the parent that deceives the family, or something like that, I shouldn't say deceive, but the parent that just cares less, the person who leaves subconsciously feels they have wronged the others, because they feel they have wronged the others. Even if they come back to the others, they feel the others don't deserve them, right? You could have the most alpha person, and they can, in some sense, in their inner realms, be incredibly the opposite. You can have a physically, somebody can be physically able And some people are externally able, and some people are internally able, you know. And forgiveness is the strength of the internal. That means it's as if all those people who could forgive and they let the world kind of move again, grow again, dance again, it's as if like these people are the true, I would say, alpha beings of the inner realms, you know. Because really what it is that we are all going towards an ending. Life is a story. It ends. And it's gonna, I will tell you, it passes by quick. If I was to take the context of this episode to a mystical sense in my findings of meditation and in my interest of wondering about the concept of nirvana, you see, it's as if in duality there is the character, there is the world. And so forgiveness is a relationship of the character with the world, or the world with the character, depending on who hurts who. You know, there are people who you can say they hurt the outer realms, and then there is that people get hurt from their outer realms. I noticed that we, from the beginning of our life, are conditioned to go after knowledge and to acknowledge a known self. This known self, in some sense, is an Iron Man suit, which we train ourselves into expressing through. Now, when somebody talks about mysticism, they're talking about that which goes beyond the sensory perception. So that which in some sense goes beyond, if the body was seen as a vehicle, beyond the vehicle of the body, and if the idea of the self of the person was seen as a vehicle, subjective vehicle, it's as if we're going beyond that. So anytime a person notices an unknown self, and there's really two ways you can notice the unknown self. You either notice the unknown world first, and then you notice you're a part of that world, so you realize your unknown self. Or you can say you just directly from the known reverse angle of your known self, you notice your unknown self. The moment the person realizes that their conscious human psychology is being projected and is inside the context of a collective, I would say, unconscious, a collectively unknown state, it means that we have to have the capacity to, as an attributeless multidimensional being, forgive our separation from truth. And when I say truth for many people, it's in the reflection of the human being. What does that mean? Pretty much there's, if one was to talk about the concept of truth and look at history, you can say truth, you can say it's kind of like either either man is made in God's image or God is made in man's image. For example, Aristotle said that if lions suddenly became conscious like human beings, they would see us, their God to them would appear as a lion. That means it's as if lions became like human beings, God would, for example, their metaphysics would probably be like God is roaring all the time, you know. Like they would have this notion of God's roar, you know. Or imagine if turtles became conscious like human beings and they wanted to engage a sort of universal, they wanted to personalize the universe from their own eyes, then they would be like, the universe is like a shell, and inside it is like all the content of the universe, you know. So you see, we are using our egos as telescopes. But the user is attributeless. And this is really the aim of mysticism. That means it's kind of like a clue or a riddle. It's like what is beyond the five senses and is still something. And you realize there is nothing. All of our sense of thingness, all of our sense that there is form, in some sense, it's all limited to sensory access. You know, if the human being was the size of the universe, that would be a completely intense sort of forgiveness, right? But because we're such a small part of this giant big world, it's easy to forgive the self. You know, and I will tell you, if something that human beings may regret, this is you can say this is one person's opinion, of course, but I think that many human beings may regret the absence of collective service. You know, there's a person by the name of Rabindranath Tagore. He says, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted and behold, service was joy. Right? So the moment the being identifies with the collective, it's so easy to forgive individual human beings. That means it's as if, like, if you're a person who wants to see the victory of your species, that means all those people who are cruel, violent, and hurting others, it's as if, oh man, these children don't know any better. You know, it's as if they haven't realized the potential at hand. You know, I would say that truth is everywhere, but it's not accessible from everywhere. And if we consider a collective nature of being, all individual concepts are they vanish. That means nouns and verbs vanish when we are no longer individual. Because if there is no self, how can there be anything? And even what's more bizarre is that the idea of ourself is a noun. That means people are like, I am this, I am that. You know, it's like it's a sort of noun, the image of self. But here's the bizarre thing: it's as if the self, the concept of a self is a noun, but the self is the noun. I don't know how to tell you. It's as if like we need a noun to have a self, but we need a self first to have a noun. So I am telling you, when it comes to language, there is something that we can, for example, create the concept of time in language and say that our body is inside time, right? It's as if like the universe is changing and we pinpoint, because we have memories, the concept of time projects. So we created the concept of time and we're like, yeah, we can pinpoint our body in space and time. But check this out. We cannot pinpoint the mind in time, because the mind is creating the concept of time. That means it's as if the film projector is projecting a film, but the projector is not the film, right? But we're acting as if the projector is the film, not realizing that the film is being played from elsewhere, as if the projector is connected to a computer, or as if this dimension is connected to a greater dimension, or whatnot. The chat section is pretty quiet. we are present. This cannot be ignored. And we even know that existence surpasses consciousness, right? It's as if anybody who's been a solipsist, let's say somebody thinks they're a solipsist, and this is why kind of solipsism doesn't make sense, where the solipsist is like, all right, it's hilarious, I'll tell you this. It's like a solipsist is someone who says that the world they see is the only world. Now imagine you're a solipsist that is waking up every day. That means pretty much you're creating like as many universes as your attention is entering the conscious from the unconscious. But in reality, we sleep, we have a dream, and our body is existing in the bed. And when we have the dream and we are conscious of our dream, it's as if the mind has created a body in a world of a dream nature, of a dreamy nature. We wake up from our dream and we recognize the whole time we were dreaming, the body was in the bed, not just only suggesting multidimensionality in human intelligence, but also it's as if existence doesn't have an opinion on itself. Existence cannot do anything other than just be. That means if we wanted to think about the existential purpose of life, it's just to exist. That means every being, by existing, they're kind of like completing their existential purpose. But when it comes to our experiential purpose, this is where piloting is required, and you can say forgiveness is a way where the pilot is ignoring, or is not ignoring, but is stepping outside of the storm. That means the airplane, the plane of existence, where the person's reality is being simulated, is moving. And so knowing your presence is the biggest spirituality. Because the presence is unknown. That means any being who knows that they are unknown, you have reached the ultimate of this dimension. The ultimate state of this dimension is unknown. All the dimensions that are known are man-made, and man is a temporary creature, is an impermanent creature. Because we're temporary, our expression is temporary. But where our expression is happening is eternal. So it seems like eternity is watching the temporal, and the temporary is dreaming of eternity. Or you can say eternity is awake to the temporary, and the temporary is dreaming of the eternal. Believe it or not, in an instant, just like a person can press Command R or Control R, and it refreshes the whatever web page they're on, I will tell you, refreshing your moment is an incredible way of releasing the attention midday. I don't do this as often as, there was a time I would do it a lot, but then after some time it's like, it becomes unnecessary. But I would pretty much throughout the day, I would find 10 minutes, 20 minutes, either like 2/3 of the day completed or like half the day completed. I would go for 10 to 20 minutes, just sit down and do nothing, as if literally put my ego's life, the game of my psychology on pause, and just be with existence. And I will tell you, in like 10 to 20 minutes, if you can just be in the moment and there is no verb or to kind of, there is nothing to do, believe it or not, if you can just be. Not only the body heals, not only the karma heals, and it just like a ripples of a pond settling, not only does your inner realm and outer realm have time to synchronize. You will find a smile from the unconditional. I have had moments like this, you know. I will tell you, there's a way a person can smile as if they are not here, as if they were never here on this earth, you know. So pretty much, guys, if you can forgive yourself, you allow not only yourself to change, but you allow the world to change. You know, there was this quote where somebody's like, forgive not because you want the other to be peaceful only, but forgive because you deserve the inner peace. You see, inner peace means a mind that is not at war with phenomenology or numenology. Alright guys, I want to go into a quote tunnel, read a couple quotes about forgiveness, and then I'll end off this episode. If there's questions, people can start asking them now. If not, you know, all is forgiven. Alexander Pope says, to err is human, to forgive divine. Martin Luther King Jr. says, darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. Henry Nguyen says, did I offer peace today? Did I bring a smile to someone's face? Did I say words of healing? Did I let go of my anger and resentment? Did I forgive? Did I love? These are the real questions. I must trust that a little bit of love that I sow now will bear many fruits here in this world and the life to come. Plato says we can easily forgive a child who's afraid of the dark. The real tragedy of life is when men are afraid of the light. You see, guys, you know, it's like I would say there is a fear where the person doesn't do anything, and then there's a fear of not doing anything. You know, it's as if like if the person sees that in this life, really it's a decision game. From the moment your eyes open, there's an incredible selection process where behind the eyes of the person, in any moment the person goes and probabilities arise. And from these probabilities, a certain range are selected. People who are emotional are doing this unconsciously. That means if people who are emotional, they're actually thinking in layers through a comparative angle. This is why emotions are powerful, and why a lot of poetry is inspired from them, because they're really a multidimensional event in the psyche. It's in contrast to the aftermath of something, you know. If we didn't have a concept of the future, and if we didn't have a concept of the past, we would actually have no emotion on anything. You know, our emotions are from the inner workings of this creaturehood we find ourselves, as if we are an organism that you know, it's like we create ourself, and from that self we become conscious of the world. Tyler Perry, I think this is Chandler, but I don't remember the guy's name exactly. Anyways, he says it's not an easy journey to get to a place where you forgive people, but it is such a powerful place, because it frees you. I think Joey would agree. You know? TD Jake says we think that forgiveness is weakness, but it's absolutely not. It takes a very strong person to forgive. You know why? Because the person who forgives is ahead of everybody. You know, those who can't forgive, they're still contaminated by their past. You know. Alan Paton says, when a deep injury is done us, we never recover until we forgive. And you know why? Because when somebody goes through an incident where they are defeated or they are a victim or something like that, they actually, at any time a person can't control any situation and it's way overwhelming, the person becomes unconscious. So imagine two people are fighting, okay, and they're having a conversation. Midway through the fight, a physical fight happens, right? And they're physically fighting, right? And then afterwards, people are like, yo, what happened? Why'd you guys fight? Right? It would be as if they're in the conflict. It's because the intensity surpasses what the ego is used to, what the mind is used to, the speed, the mind. You know what it is? It's as if like conflict is like we're used to going 50 miles per hour. Suddenly we have to go into the highway, you know? So a person can be in a situation, and if they fear it, the moment you fear something, you stop being conscious of the moment. That means you pretty much you put a box of the past on your head and you function. This is why we have to accept ourselves, but we have to also scan, literally like a drone, behind our eyes, navigate in our inner realms and find all the moments where we stopped being conscious in the middle. That means, imagine, if you were a Buddhist, this conversation would be totally next level. You know, you'd be like, Mr. Within, are you telling me I gotta remember all my lifetimes? And even though the Buddha did this, but I will tell you, you just have to realize there is life before there is time. And it's easy to forgive people the moment you're outside of the linguistic simulation. If you're inside the linguistic simulation, you can't forgive people because the story has locked you into an emotion that needs to be resolved. You know, there are certain systems of thought. When I say systems of thought, guys, because we're human beings, it's not like people own thought. Nobody can own thought, believe it or not. Right? People can speak certain words for the first time in the realm that have maybe never been spoken before. But really, concepts cannot be owned. Concepts can be noticed, believe it or not. You know why? Because the concepts arise from reality, and reality is already here. That means every person who in some sense owns a concept, even though we have to, we have no choice because we're individuals in a language-based civilization, right? So we need to have an individual history. But in reality, existence doesn't have a second opinion on itself. You know, it doesn't need a second opinion on itself. Because what it is, it's pretty much like, how would I say it? It's as if energy has no morality, and forgiveness is required when there has been disturbance and interference with how an individual has been moving in a collective, or how a collective is moved in an individual, you know? That means, believe it or not, it's not just people who have to forgive. Nations have to forgive. If our planet had a war with another planet, planets would have to forgive, you know? because the view, the all I guess the attention has to continue, or the attention will continue, and it's all about how we accompany it. That means it's as if like I can choose to not move from this moment, but life will move on. So because things move on and new dimensions are added, it makes sense to forgive and to bring events that were in our unconscious into the conscious. Carl Jung says, unless you make the unconscious conscious, it will dictate your life, and call it fate. And what that means is, unless you bring something that was, let's say, you remembered like a moment in your childhood and something happened and you don't know why you did something the way you did it, okay, that's in some sense like an event that is in the unconscious. That means it's as if the memory went as far as there was consciousness, the existential event completed, but the consciousness, it's literally as if like if consciousness is a light or is a camera, this camera didn't record an event, so but the existential events are taking place all the time. In Vedic thought, the view on karma is that it's an ocean, and what that means is pretty much everything is an ocean of information. That means, sure, we can say there's human beings on the planet, yay, humanity. We could also be like, whoa, it's just information, an ocean of information, and a wave in this ocean of information is what we're calling the human being, right? So what that means is, on an existential level or in any sort of singular context of being, there is literally no forgiveness, and it's another way of saying where it's as if there's only God, right? So when a person understands that they're a soul, it's as if the soul is the extension of God through the theological lens. So in some sense, when a soul makes a mistake, it's kind of like God forgiving himself. But also for the human personality, this I have to say this, that in many religious ideology, religious systems of perceiving life, they have this view that if a person asks forgiveness from the source of creation, in some sense, then in some sense, if they change their ways, it's like good things will happen, right? There's that kind of idea. But I would say to ask forgiveness from the source of creation is kind of like asking forgiveness from what you see in the mirror. It's as if it is our attention that is engaging the unknown. So in our attempts in life to make the unconscious conscious, forgiveness is choosing something that was in your consciousness to go back into the unconscious. That means think as if your mind is a vehicle, and this vehicle has a space for, let's say, like 5 passengers, you know. I'm just saying as a metaphor, for metaphor's sake, I'm comparing, you know, consciousness to a vehicle. But I would say it's as if, imagine a passenger that is disturbing, like, let's say you're an Uber driver, and so there's a passenger, you've got 2 different passengers at the same time, and so let's say the passenger is let's say one of the passengers causes difficulty, so the Uber driver would request that passenger to in some sense leave or behave, right? And so forgiveness is kind of like letting go of the inefficient because we deserve the efficient, and we don't deserve the efficient just because we've suffered. We deserve the efficient because it's a possibility. That means a lot of things in life, they have nothing to do with one's past. Even if a person brings their past into it, it just confuses the presence of the moment from just being realized as to be new, you know. And I would say Moriya Ushiba, the founder of Aikido, he said one of the most coolest sentences, which I think sums down the result of forgiveness and how forgive the self that did not know. Moriya Ushiba says, create each day anew. And in order to create it anew, our attention cannot be dominated by our past. Our attention should be liberated by our past. That means every person, or whatever life they've lived, like anyone who's listening to this live stream, up until this moment, whatever life you've lived, whatever past you've had, you in some sense have to look back at it and salute the past as if your memories served you, right? And now allow the attention to bring in new memories, right? Because it's all about the creation of reality through the simultaneity of an unknown dynamic mind and a sort of static known body, where the elements of the periodic table are set in the stone of our minds. It's like we consider the periodic table to have a sort of absolutist validity. Anyways, one more thing I could say, in the lines of thinking, we can say there are waves of information that build up upon one another. So you can say the first wave of information is non-ideological, then the second wave of information becomes ideological, and forgiveness is in some sense from the second, releasing the second wave symbolism, so the attention in the first wave, the experiential dimension, continues on. That means if you're someone who you care for your eyes, the future of your eyes, you have to tolerate and be patient with a world that is in poetically under construction, or historically under construction. It's like we're all living in human civilization. We're all on a sphere, building stuff on the sphere, all of our ancestors, but we hadn't thought of the finish line. And the finish line of human civilization, I have called it the advanced civilization. So in order to bring forth an advanced civilization, we shouldn't even think of forgiveness or not. We should just treat the moment as multidimensional and see that people have different dimensions, and the way we communicate to them can activate those dimensions. There's a saying that says the quickest way to get rid of an enemy is to make them your friend. And you can say in another way, the quickest way to get rid of suffering of any sort is to understand it. And when a person looks at their suffering, the suffering is there as long as you're looking at it. Only when your eyes go beyond the suffering, you see something else. Pretty much, if suffering was an art gallery, it's like the person who's suffering is like they're in an art gallery with so many different artworks, so many different ways that the human intelligence can express, but the attention is just looking at one artwork in the art gallery and being like, why am I only seeing this? Why am I caught in samsara? When there's so many ways that the eyes are open before they are open. So anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I hope this episode was helpful to all those who are members of the channel. I encourage you to take advantage of the Discord community, and I'll be on there as well after this talk. So and just to re-emphasize the update, so guys, I gotta take some time off, pretty much rest. I don't know, inhale eucalyptus, I don't know. And then I'll come back to the talks. But there's much ahead. I've been even working on this project supporter meeting, which I will set up for members. But anyways, this is too much of the update. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. And remember, it's okay to forgive, and it takes an instant, and you get to see a new world if you do. So forgive when you can, but also don't be ignorant. That means if a person can also forgive someone and that person doesn't even see them. It says, imagine as if somebody's being abusive to you, and you see this, especially for women, I would say, right? Women get into abusive relationships, and it's not just for women. I mean, I gotta be a feminine, share the feminist perspective as well. Let's say there's also men who get into, they're abused by women. And the idea is that you gotta realize if the intelligence in the moment sees you. That means if a person doesn't care for the inner realms of the other person, that the other person, let's say person A and person B, if person B doesn't care for the inner realms of person A, but person A cares for the inner realms of person B, person A, it literally has put a box over their head and they're getting destroyed in the process, right? So the person has to have a sort of street smart level of, without emotion, just looking at the logistics, looking at just what is going on, you know, in the moment, the reality of the moment, and then the concept of forgiveness can be applied, right? You know, it's as if somebody, imagine like, yeah, that's pretty much very key. That means whoever you are, and the reason we as human beings have a mouth and we can communicate is so that if others do not see our inner realms, we have the advantage of sharing it, right? Because you can say which is better, to forgive or to go and have a conversation with the person and have a sort of communication where you don't have to forgive infinitely. Instead, by updating the communication and the understanding in the moment, there becomes even no need to forgive. That means I'm not saying forgive, but don't, you know, I'm not saying like, I'm not saying blindly forgive. Forgive after you have observed the presence of the moment. And people know we're such advanced beings that we have an energetic relationship with the universe, which is instantaneous. When we access that, I will tell you, it's as if the person who was looking for enlightenment will realize the moment is. Thanks for listening, guys. Blessings. I'll be on Discord also.